We're in the Daly in Butlersbridge with PJ Dunne. PJ, you're about to launch a book on the history of Butlersbridge.
I am, Brian. First of all, thanks very much for having me on your programme, and a welcome to all our friends from Butlersbridge and other places. Yeah, I was asked some years ago to do a book on the history of Butlersbridge. There was a book done in 1988 by Daly on the history of the football club, and it was felt that it was time to revisit, and so I was asked to do it, and I was delighted to be asked to do it. And it wasn't soon afterwards I realised that it carried a great responsibility in doing it, because there's an awful lot of background information. There was a lot of background information to be put together and gathered, and well, I relished it really, and I got a lot of help from a lot of people. And it really, the book itself is called A History of Butlersbridge, but it was really the people of the village who helped me. I mean, it's really up to them. Every bit that I've in this is a little anecdote, a story, a picture. Everybody helped in preparing what is now the completed book.
Now, as you say, there's a lot of preparatory work in assembling a book of that size. Did you enjoy that work?
I did. I'm from the village myself. I was born here in 1952, and there's a great sense of place within the people of the village, no matter when you're born here, whether you stay here, whether you move away. People have a great tendency to look back and reflect on where they came from, the school they went to, the church they attended, their friends, the socialising, all the whole aspects of life. So I did enjoy doing it. I came across a lot of information that I didn't realise was about. I mean, I came across the information. I came across new material in the sense of that there was an ancient habitation here in the village way back over 4,000 years ago. There was a polished grey wax stone axe head that was found here behind us. We're in the Daly Inn, and the Daly River's here behind us, and it was found here at the building of the bridge here in 1820, and it's now up in the National Museum in Dublin. So there was activity, human activity here long before going back now. That's gone back 6,000 years. So we also came across, which was referred to earlier as it was a very ornate brooch found down in an island across the river at Orney, across the Erin River at Orney, in a townland called Rivery. There was a lovely ornate silver brooch, and it's called the Cavantv brooch, and it was so liked by the Queen. It was called the Queen's brooch. So we have a history here of human activity, of human creativity in the village going back centuries. We have ancient monasteries down at Orney. We have an ancient monastery down at Anna. We have had here in this house. We had a very prominent family. Well, they're not ancient in the sense of they're back as far as the 1800s. The O'Reilly family. We had the Baker family just across our border in Drumlane. They control some of our townlands within our district, Strone and Hackerty. We had the O'Reillys in Havana. Dr. Edward was the most prominent of those. He married one of the Chamberlain family from Birkenhead in Liverpool, and he was very, very prominent in the civil rights movement here in the 1840s. Died very young on a trip to his mother-in-law's funeral in Birkenhead. So there's a lot of tradition, a lot of fusion of different aspects of life in what is really a small community. the village is, very small. I think it was in 1837. The population was 211. I'm not sure. I think it was around 1900. It was about. I think it was 194. So that's just the village area itself. Now there's a wider, absolutely much more populated in the wider hinterland around it. But for a small place, what I'm trying to say to you, Brian, is that for a small place, there was a lot of influences going on in the area. Yeah.
You covered quite a considerable period of time in a brief conversation there with items dating back over 6,000 years. In assembling all this information, what sort of methodology did you use? Did you spend times hidden away?
Well, for the Cavan, the Johnson Library in Cavan, Google has been a great help as well, and I had great assistance from Pádraig Gaffney, who works in Cavan County Council, a native here of the village, and he's a bit of a very competent on the computer, and he came across a lot of references that I otherwise mightn't have come across. And then I had great help. My brother Philip went to museums in Dublin, graveyards. My own brother Raymond wrote 2 articles on the clergymen. I had great help from locals like Sean Brogan, like Eugene Wilson, like Paddy Gaffney, Pádraig's father. We had a whole lot of people like that. Norby Fitzpatrick, Brian Brady of Greenfield, Mary Shannon, Clonus wrote her late mother Kathleen Duffy. I mean, the list goes, Terry Leddy, Paddy Leddy, the list goes on and on and on. So it was a case of finding, say, material on the historical evidence and researching that and combining that myself. But on the other hand, then I had to speak to a lot of locals who had anecdotal or oral tradition that was handed down to them, and I was able to capture a lot of that. I'm sure had we met a lot of more elderly people from past generations, we'd have had far more material. But we are where we are, as I say. So it really isn't my book. It's a book of everybody else. Everybody else has contributed to it, and it's a combination of everybody's story and all the bits together come together in this publication.
Well, you mentioned that there was a book written earlier about Butlersbridge, primarily about the football. Did you find anything new for your book on the history of?
Well, I did, but I have to say that was a great resource, and Paddy Leddy, I asked Paddy, and he allowed me to read it, so to speak. And there were reminiscences in that from an elderly lady, Mrs. MacDonald. She was a very, very clear-minded lady, and we got some good information from that. I found a lot of other new information. I found about during the famine, for instance, that the workhouse in Cavan in the 1847, I think it was, they had 2 houses out here in Butlersbridge in which they had up to 150 children housed as a result of the famine. Now, we haven't established exactly where they are, but I've spoken with Andrew Boylan, I've spoken with Eugene Babington Wilson, I've spoken with the late Kathleen Duffy, and most thoughts point to it being across the road here at Derrygard beside Mary Tierney's home. There were old sheds there with a stone wall, and I believe up until the 1940s it was a 2-story building with a gable end to it. It's thought that was the most likely spot. An additional pointer on that is that the man who owned this house here was John O'Reilly, and he was succeeded by his son Thomas. And they were very, very prominent people in the village. They had a mill. When John died, I think it was in 1840, I'm not sure of that date now, there was up on 300 of his workers followed his cortege down to his burial in Drumlane Cemetery. So they were a very prominent family. They employed a lot of people here. There was a mill across the river here just behind us over at Downs's, beside the late Brendan Farrell's home. And it would have been the nucleus in the village for activity. People getting their stocks there for baking and for all farming purposes. So he was very prompt. So he also supplied potatoes and all the rest of it to the workhouse in Cavan. So I have a funny feeling that he may well, the only thing that he may well have had that place across the road let out as a place for these poor children during the famine. The only thing that's against that theory is that he mightn't have let them too close to his own home, and it is very close to his own home. So that was new. That was very new. We found there was a mill here in 1626. I mean, I came across that in one of the Breffni journals, a reference. So like there was albeit it was a small industrial process, but there was industrialization to an extent here in 1626. It was actually a working mill in 1620, described as a working mill in 1626. So we've come across a lot of, and in more modern times, I came across was very, very kind of the late Vincent Bartley, who just died there last November, very, very, very suddenly, and he was extraordinarily generous. He gave me an Irish constabulary book. It was the forerunner of the Royal, the RIC, the Royal Irish Constabulary. It was a barrack house here in Butlersbridge, and he had the minutes of the record books of the instances that happened in the village from 1851 to 1854. Now it was hard to get through it, but we got through it, and we did a summary of the crimes in the area and all the rest of it. Now we didn't mention anybody's names, so there's no Dunnes in it, or Smiths, or Rileys, or Barclays, or anybody else in it. We left those out. He also gave me a shop book, a counter book that belonged to his grandfather, John Bartley, who owned where Agatha Smith's public house premises is at the moment. And it describes in that grocery items, ladies' wear, men's wear, footwear, drink prices, the description of drinks that people bought, the names of people who were in the area that passed through, and they might have got a half on a bottle and put it on the tick and paid the following week. And there's a whole lot of names of people from the area that are no longer present in the area, sadly so. But several little new things like that we came across, you know.
Now, as we know, Butlersbridge has been bypassed a couple of years. So how has the modern day Butlersbridge coped with the changes that have taken place in the Irish society? Yeah, well, they're blessed
with a fantastic community spirit. There's a great sense of get up and get on. And for instance, Brian McEntee's butcher shop does very well here. Paddy Fine's grocery shop is very well. 3 public houses have their customer base. And the regrettable thing is that the post office is closed. There was a post office here in the village going back to 1835, and I'm not sure, is it 5 or 7 years ago since Mrs. Farrell retired, and it's just regrettable that that hasn't continued. People probably have to travel now into Cavan post office to get their pension and whatever other bits and pieces they have to get. But there are people. It's a resilient community. I mean, when you look at all the different developments, the football club has undergone amazing transformation in the last 20 years. What fantastic grounds, clubhouse, the school, one of the most modern schools in the country. The chapel has been recently done, €1 million spent on it. What a beautiful place. And as I understand it, there's very little, if anything, owed on it. There's the Development Association. There's Santa Claus every year. There's the water. They've now amalgamated with the Red Hills group water scheme. I mean, there's been water brought to the farmers' yards for the last many years, and the huge development that has meant in hygiene and in productivity. And the bypass really hasn't affected us in a negative way. It has affected us in a positive way, you know, I would think.
Now, that seems that is very detailed and up to the modern day. When do you envisage that the book will be launched?
Well, we have a date set. It's set for the 10th of March in the community hall here in Butlersbridge, and I hope that as many people from the Butlersbridge area who come on the evening. We'd love you to have all your support here. I'm having it launched by Dr. Brendan Scott. He's an historian. He's the current editor of the Breffni Journal. We're having a grandnephew of a late resident of the village, Harry Condell, speak as well. He's Dr. Jonathan Cherry. He lectures in St. Pastrum Condra on geography with a special interest in historical geography. We're having locals, Andrew Boylan, who's now the chairman of the Border Regional Association, and we're having Kevin Smith, who's from the village, very, very passionate villager, brother of Cawn's and son of Danny's, and he's coming down to give us some of his memories on the night. And I'm very lucky to have a retired teacher, Terry Leddy. He has agreed to chair the evening's affair, and there'll be a cup of tea and there'll be a bun or a pastry for everybody, and I hope it'll be an enjoyable and a memorable evening. The book will be for sale here in Butlersbridge, in Foynes and McEntees, in Crannog in Cavan, and in Young's. I call it the Young's, it's Easton's now, and up in Upper Main Street. And I hope people enjoy it. I hope people, when they read it, see a reflection of their community between the pages. There's a whole lot of other pieces of information in it that I haven't actually covered, but that I haven't mentioned in this interview that is covered in the book, so to speak. Yes, right.
And with most community-based books, have you it dedicated to any individual or to any organisation within the community? I
have, but I'm funding it myself, and I'm taking a calculated risk that it'll break even. And if there's any funds left over, I hope to give it for the Church Renovation Committee. Next year is the 150th anniversary of the building of our beautiful chapel here, St. Aidan's, and I think there's no deficit left on the church renovation fund. But if there's any funds over, I will definitely give it over to that committee. I'd just like to say that for any of our viewers that are abroad, I hope that you can get a copy of the book as soon as possible. And if there's any items that come up in the book on which you need further clarification on your families or connections, feel free to email it to Pádraig on the Butlersbridge website. I'm not too familiar with the emailing system, but if you are, Pádraig will pass on the queries to myself, and if I'm not able to help you, I'll get somebody from the area who might be able to throw light on your query. So feel free to do that, and I hope all your viewers get a copy first of all, and secondly, I hope that you all enjoy it. It's called Butlersbridge History.
And finally, you have a beautiful old photograph on the front cover. Can you outline where the origins of the photograph?
I can. It was very lucky to find it. There was a foresters' convention in Cavan in 1913, and a booklet was produced for it. And the photographs were taken by a man called Patrick Brady from Tullyco. It's out near Mine Hall in Cavan Town. And a daughter of this Mr. Brady is married to Michael Swords. And one night I met him in town, and I asked him whether any other photographs that Mr. Brady might have had, and in particular, was there any for Butlersbridge? And lo and behold, didn't Michael give me this photograph that was taken by his father-in-law, Patrick Brady. Now I think this Mr. Brady took these photographs in his spare times as a hobby, and so we got it and we captured it. I got it. It was a kind of very yellow, and all the rest of it had to be cleaned up. I don't know what the technical phrase for that is, but we got it cleaned up. And in the photograph, you mightn't see it, but there are a series of single-storey houses on the right-hand side as you go up the village heading for Clonus, where our house, where I was born and reared, it was a single-storey house. According to Eugene Wilson, there was a bakery in one of those 3 houses, and the other 3 houses was occupied by the Browns, previously the Kings, and the McGowans, and we're not sure who occupied the 3rd house. But it's a kind of an evocative photograph. It was taken around 1900, and I collect pictures of County Cavan, and I have many of Butlersbridge, and I was absolutely knocked out when I saw this photograph, and that's why it's not the what do you call it, the most clear of pictures, but it captures the village kind of before the development occurred, before this new age, so to speak. It's around 1900, 1910. That's the best time we can attribute to it. So that's how that came around.
PJ Dunne, author, Butlersbridge, a history. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian, very much. Thank you very much for having me.